Salve te omnes. All right, we are back for Athena Part 2. Um, so, here we see Athena sort of like pondering something, lost in thought. Wisdom and planning and strategy are things really associated with her. She's involved in almost every single mythological story. She generally like helps heroes or aids in one side of a war. So planning and thinking and being wise is kind of her normal mindset. She's associated with Athens because, of course, Athena, Athens, it's the same root. She is the patron goddess of Athens. And as you know, you've studied in either 6th grade or in 9th grade, Athens was the center of civilization in Greece, especially the cultivated arts, philosophy, history, architecture, sculpture, poetry. So many learned philosophers were in Athens. Socrates was in Athens. Plato was in Athens, etc. Drama. All of our best playwrights from Greece lived in Athens. So she kind of represents Athens. So she kind of represents Greek culture, Greek civilization, and everything that Athens produced at its height. And like I was saying in part 1, we have more depictions of Athena than probably any other god or goddess, even Zeus. We've got Athena depicted on all sorts of art from all time periods. And again, she's a very compelling figure. Female, but not taking traditional female roles according to Greek or Roman society. She fights in wars. She's really smart. She helps heroes. In fact, most of the most famous heroes wouldn't have been very successful if it were not for Athena's help. Athena on coins. And of course, as the patron goddess of Athens, Athena was famous just for that fact. Here we see Athena's head on one side and an owl on the other side of a coin. We talked a lot about the Aegis, Perseus's decapitated head. There's another really good. This is kind of like a sympathetic Aegis. Kind of makes you feel bad for Medusa there. And again, notice the features of Athena will not really change very much from depiction to depiction. Again, the helmet, the spear, the shield are gonna, and the dress pretty much tell you got to be looking at Athena. Again, we talked about the little winged helper goddess Nike, or Victory. In Latin, it's Victoria. The big shield, the big helmet, and the Aegis again, Medusa's decapitated head, and the snake imagery around it, as the snakes were Medusa's hair. Ooh, here's like a really scary, modern, sort of CGI version of Athena. This is kind of what I always imagined Athena being like when reading mythological stories, is that she might be very wise, she might be very helpful, but she is fierce. And that the Aegis is meant to inspire dread. Of course, we can't talk about Athena without talking about Athens, the Acropolis, and the Parthenon. Now, this isn't Athens. This isn't the Acropolis. This is actually a full-size replica of the Parthenon, which is kind of randomly outside of Nashville, Tennessee. It's really big. You'll see that those are adults right there, and look how big this temple is. I have not been to this one. I've been to the real one. This one's really cool to show you because of what the columns would look like, and then all the art, all the sculpture all around it. But Athens is, of course, incredible. The Acropolis is a natural basic rock. Basically, it's like a rock formation that forms like a little mini mountain, a hill in the middle of the city. So you can see off in the distance the city, and here we are on the Acropolis. There are a lot of like small temples. This is actually a minor temple nearby the Parthenon called. This is the temple. Excuse me, the temple of Athena Nike, or Nike as they pronounce it. Another Athena. Again, you can see big similarities in all of our depictions of Athena. There's so many of them. Ooh, that's a good one. And this is a Roman copy of the Greek original here. And you'll notice that this is the one that in part one I talked a lot about, that the one that was at the temple at the Parthenon. We actually have Roman copies of it as well, so we know exactly what it looked like pretty much. A really big snake, the big shield. Okay, Athens. This is a composite of several different satellite images of Athens, as you can see, like kind of like stuck together. Athens is a major metropolitan city. It's the only major metropolitan city in Greece. It's like the size of Los Angeles, like 10 million people, something really big. Ancient Athens would have been like that. Modern Athens is all of this, going all the way to the mountains. Development, as far as the eye can see. As long as there's land, Athens kept on growing. Now, those of you that have been at Loveland for 6th grade or 9th grade, you probably remember talking about the Peloponnesian War and how the Spartans would invade Athens every year, and that Athens was a city, and it had the long walls down to the Piraeus, its port. This is the Piraeus right here. So imagine like that being that land you talk about in history class, and now the city is enormous. Again, it's like the size of Los Angeles. From pretty much anywhere in the city, you can see the Acropolis. Again, the Acropolis are these natural rock formations, which you can see here. These walls were later built. Athens has been fortified and refortified over the centuries. It was controlled by the Venetians at one point. It was controlled by the Turks at one point. It was part of the Roman Empire, of course. And here is the Parthenon, probably the most famous Greek temple of all, on the very top of the Acropolis. Notice there are other buildings on top of the Acropolis as well. If you get a chance to go to Athens, you really, really don't want to skip going to the Acropolis. There's a fee, of course, but then you can pretty much wander around wherever you want to. And if you remember in some of our previous videos, I talked about the Agora. Specifically, that's where we saw the Temple of Hephaestus down in the Agora. This is the Agora down here below the Acropolis, which is, again, a giant park. It's a separate entry fee to go to both of them. You could basically spend a whole day on the Acropolis and down in the Agora. So from this angle, you could see the modern city. You could see the Agora. You could see some of the other buildings that are below it, like this is the Theater of Herodes Atticus, which is a Roman theater from, like 600 years after the Parthenon was built. Parthenon kind of stands really tall over the rock and over the walls. Notice the other smaller temples up there as well. This is an image from an airplane looking down over Athens, where you can see the Acropolis. You'll notice that Athens is very polluted, how everything just kind of fades into white. This is actually the sea here. There's a bay. It's a gulf. It's called the Saronic Gulf. And if it's rained and it's a clear day, you'll be able to see it, and the Peloponnese, where Sparta is, across the bay. But on this day, it was really, really smoggy. Again, it's just a very polluted city. It's kind of like Los Angeles in that there's mountains by the ocean, and the mountains kind of trap all the air, and it's difficult to get the pollution kind of out of there. But this is, again, that Roman temple I was talking about. The Roman theater we were talking about. There are many, many images of the Acropolis and the Parthenon. One of the other buildings on the Acropolis, called the Erechtheion, is really famous because in place of columns, it has women. This is right across from the Parthenon, and you'll notice that there are many, many rocks just kind of laying around the ground that fell from one temple or another over the centuries. This is Syntagma Square, which is kind of like the political center of Athens, like where Parliament is and where big hotels are, and sort of like the city center, like the modern city center. Notice how the Acropolis towers over the rest of the city, and you can see the Parthenon right there. That's the Erechtheion again. Ooh, at night. At night they light the Acropolis up. There's the Parthenon. Athens, very beautiful city at night. It is enormous. And then the number of rocks that are still just laying around is also enormous. And you'll get a sense of scale when I show you some pictures where people are standing in front of it. You'll notice that it's frequently under construction. Every single time I've gone there, there's scaffolding kind of all over the place doing reconstruction work or just maintenance work. Again, Athens is very polluted, so frequently the air pollution actually causes damage to the rocks. Here's Athens at night again. Again, notice these natural rock formations and the walls and the Parthenon above it. It's a really good aerial shot of the Acropolis. You can see the walls. This is the Parthenon. This is the Erechtheion. That's the little temple of Athena Nike. This is the old Acropolis Museum. About 10 or 15, maybe 20 years ago, they built a new Acropolis building that's further down. There is sculpture everywhere all around it. It was a very, very ornate place. If you think back to our Zeus videos, I showed you the Temple of Zeus in Athens. This is a shot of it from the Acropolis. There's a theater of Dionysus on the underneath it as well. Here you can see how smoggy it is. Like you can see the coastline. That's the Piraeus down there. And you could barely even see the coastline, and you can barely see the Acropolis here too through the pollution. Athens, as the biggest city in Greece, was selected to become the first modern Olympics. So the Olympic Games, which were held for about 1,000 years in the ancient world, stopped being held around the 400s or 500s AD, and they were started again in 1896 in our modern era. These are the Olympics that we all watch every 4 years. And the very first Olympic stadium was in Athens, and it's still there. It's from 1896. You do have to pay to see it, unfortunately. When I was in Greece back in the 90s, you could just go there and run around, and it was free. Nowadays, you got to pay just to even enter it. And this is Athens. There's me. This is 1998. I was studying abroad. I was in college, and this is the top of my apartment building. We could see the Acropolis from the roof. Here's me. You can't see me, but I'm inside the Acropolis, right? I'm inside the Parthenon right now. We had a special pass where our archaeology professor let us actually walk inside the Parthenon. So here's taking a picture from the inside. That is my head right there. This is proof that I was literally inside the Parthenon. This was in 1999. There's my Greek archaeology professor, and these were the other students that were with me when I studied abroad. I've got a million picture. Oh, there's me again. I went to Penn State, so I'm wearing a Penn State shirt. It is a really big temple. A really, really, really big temple. We were only allowed to go inside the Parthenon once with a special pass. We visited the Acropolis and stood outside the Parthenon dozens and dozens of times. It is just so monumental. And the pictures don't actually do it justice. It's bigger than it seems. Like you have a sense of awe when you're on top of the Parthenon. When you're on top of the Acropolis and you're anywhere near the Parthenon. This is looking down at the Theater of Dionysus from the Acropolis. This is looking out over Athens. There's the 1896 Olympic Stadium. There's the Temple of Zeus. This is a shot from the Acropolis. It's one of the best things about the Acropolis is not even looking at the things on the Acropolis. It's looking at like everything else you can see from it. Again, Athens has a lot of stuff going on. Here's me again, sitting on the wall. It's a pretty clear day, so you can see the water. It wasn't that polluted that day. And here's all of Athens out in the distance. You can even see the mountains and everything. Again, I went to Penn State. You might have heard this story that the Parthenon. Oh, here's a replica of what it probably looked like in the ancient world with an enormous statue of Athena and just buildings just towering over everything. Here's the Agora. There's a little model of what it probably looked like. Yeah, this story. So it was 1687. In 1687, only 400 years ago, less than 400 years ago, 350 years ago, it was still intact. And the Venetians were attacking the Turks. And there was ammunition in there, and the whole thing blew up. Rocks flying into the air. So if anybody visited it before 1687, they would have been able to see the whole Parthenon. But unfortunately, war happens. Okay, I've talked enough about Athena and Athens. Wale te omnes.